Welcome and thanks for joining us for Two Steps Forward, our daily Bible study. I'm James, this is Aid. We are up to episode 287 and finishing Leviticus today, Leviticus 26 and 27. I think you're probably kind of excited about that, Aid, and I want to invite you to sing the Year of Jubilee song if you would like to do so.
No, I didn't know all the words. It's Behold, he comes, riding on the clouds, ha 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 ha. At the trumpet sound, so lift your voice.
It's the year of Jubilee.
And out of Zion's hill,
salvation comes.
We sang it at Forgiven. One of our church bands sang it, and I got really into it. And James said, you must have known that song. And I said, yeah, we sang it all the time in our church growing up. But one of our musicians likes to do, the bass player does a double clap.
Yeah, he's an amazing bass player, and he gets so into it that he does like cut time.
Yeah, so when he does it, I start doing it, but no one else does it. So then when he goes back to bass playing, everyone else is just clapping, and I'm up there like...
like a seal wanting a treat.
Yeah, that's rude.
Well, it is funny. But there are those moments in songs where like, okay, you shut off the clapping, and then someone's a little bit late to the memo on when we're not clapping anymore. But
there was this little boy behind me at Easter wearing a suit, and he was clapping so loud. It was the cutest. Like his legs, he was so small, his legs stuck out straight from the pew.
Yeah.
He had like a grown man clap.
Yeah, it was cute. Yeah. All right, so Leviticus 26 and 27 today. We're closing it out. If you haven't read through chapter 26, pause and read through that right now. Here is my personal summary. God tells the Israelites not to set up idols. He's already told them this before, but he has to continue to remind them of this. He says that if they respect the Sabbath and his sanctuary and his commandments, there will be tremendous blessing attached to that. Their fields will produce tremendously and they will live in safety. They will be successful in battle. Their nation will increase in size. God will dwell amongst them and bless them. God reminds the Israelites that he's the one that brought them out of slavery. An important reminder whenever he's asking you to do something to say, don't forget I'm the one that released you to this point in the first place. On the other hand, if the Israelites ignore God and his decrees, they'll be defeated by their enemies. Their fields won't produce. Wild animals will attack them. God will break them down and humble them. It could eventually get so bad that the Israelites will experience famine, siege on their cities, and resort to actually eating their own children, which is actually part of a prophecy for when the Israelites are sieged later on. They're going to constantly live in fear if they disobey God. God says that despite all this, even when they are in captivity, he will not reject them or forget them. Instead, he will remember his covenant with them. All right, that's 26. First devotional thought is the conditional if of the Old Testament covenant. That word if is very significant to the original covenant with God's people. Not so much in the new covenant, we'll explain why, but the Old Testament covenant, there's three major ones just in this chapter. Verse 3 says, if you walk in my statutes. Verse 14 says, but if you do not obey me. And verse 40 says, but if they confess their iniquity. So God's intention was that the Israelite people, if they trusted in him enough to obey his commands, they would be extraordinarily blessed, like supernaturally blessed in their fields, in their victories in battle, in his providence to them. Here's the catch though. That's an Old Testament covenant blessing. It does not apply to the church today. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now there still is very clearly some implicit blessing in obedience to God's commands. But it doesn't always translate to like health, wealth, and success. And we know, like when you read through Hebrews and you hear the great heroes of faith chapter, mm-hmm. and we find that there was a bunch of people who suffered not despite their faith, but because of their faith. Mm-hmm. Like specifically because they obeyed God, they suffered as a result of this, and they didn't experience miraculous provision or deliverance in those periods. Not to mention, we've had millions of Christian martyrs over the years. So like this, like eviscerates some of that prosperity theology stuff that sounds good to our flesh, but is not historically or theologically accurate. This covenant, the Old Testament covenant, related only to Israel and in their land, and was God's way of conditioning them towards faithfulness and obedience. For the New Testament covenant explanation, for the new So Jesus, when he institutes the Lord's Supper, it says a new covenant in my blood. Maybe the best summary of that new covenant is given for us in Jeremiah 31 to 34, where he says, I will remember your sins no more. Everyone will know my goodness. I will remember your sins no more. So Jeremiah 31 is kind of a famous passage on this. But in what ways do you think it seems perhaps that believers today still function like they're under the old covenant, if then the new covenant?
Yeah, I think people do feel like, well, yes, if I attend church or if I give my offering, God will do this. Almost more the other way though, like not if I do it, he'll bless me, but if I don't do it, something bad's going to happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something very naturally religious about that. I know I've told the story before, but when I was a teenager and putting $10 versus $1 in the offering plate and assuming God is going to bless me with being good at sports and being angry when I had a bad game then. And what is that? That's old covenant if thinking. Like, I've been generous to you, even though he hadn't told me exactly how much to give or anything like that. It's like somehow you're not holding up to your end of the bargain. He's already saved you. He's already blessed you. He's already secured a spot in heaven for you. He owes us nothing. And he's given us everything for our future. The idea that we would ever resent him for what we're currently getting in the present is, number one, it's just illogical. Number two, it's based on a series of if thinking.
Why do you think God let the Israelites go on for so long before Jesus came? Why did they have to go through all this miserable existence for 2,000 years? And why do I have to continue to go through this miserable existence?
Well, yeah, I mean, so long is a relative experience, or a lifetime is a relative length. When you in the grand scheme of God, or in the grand scheme of eternity and billions of years and stuff. I think one of the ways I would look at it is God being patient. He wants to. No one.
Oh, wait, how many years?
So
6,000
from the
years?
time of Moses, it's 1,500. From 1,500 from Moses to Jesus. So the Israelite nation. I mean, if you want to start it with Abraham, then you're going back to 2,000 years.
Let's start it with Adam and Eve and go to Jesus.
Well, humanity starts obviously with Adam and Eve, and in some respects, yes, the Israelites trace their ancestry back, but it wasn't until Abraham, who's considered the father of the Israelites, and he's around 2,000 BC.
So how many years from Adam and Eve to Jesus? 6,000?
Yeah, that is the most confusing part that we don't know. We have clear records from Jesus to present, and we have really pretty clear records from about Abraham to Jesus. That accounts for a total of 4,000 years. The time from Adam and Eve to Abraham is where there is some question marks. Probably in the thousands, somewhere between 2 and maybe up to 5,000 or 6,000. So, yeah, so this whole...
How come he didn't have a nation before then?
Well, so it's not that he didn't have people. So we know that, for instance, Cain and Abel are presenting offerings to God. They didn't have the Mosaic code of how you make offerings and that sort of thing.
Well, all those genealogies with Enoch and all that's before Abraham.
So there was a bunch of people who they knew God is out there. He had revealed himself in some ways. Even, the time where God and angelic visitors come to visit Abraham, and he talks about how he's fallen away. Lot has fallen away from faith. It's okay, clearly Lot has an understanding of who the true God is. And so even prior to Moses, before they had this very official worship system, some people recognized the true God for who he is, and some people didn't. We know by the time of Noah, a lot of people had forgotten who the true God was, except for Noah and his family.
Wait, sorry. Can you say the names and the numbers?
The names and the numbers of...
Okay, so Adam and Eve, 0.
Yes.
Noah?
We don't know, but probably around 22 to 2500 BC.
Moses? Nope, Abraham.
Abraham, 2000 BC.
Moses, 500.
1500.
1500.
Yeah.
David, 500.
1000. David, 1000. 500 BC is when the Israelites returned from captivity in Babylon.
Okay.
Those to me are the most important dates, the old numbers to keep in mind for the Old Testament. Abraham, 2000. Moses, 1500. David, 1000. Returned from Babylonian captivity, 500.
Jesus, 0.
Jesus, 0.
33.
Yeah. Probably like 4 BC, actually. But, who's counting? So, again, just be grateful that we live under a new covenant that is just, God says, I'll love you. Not I'll love you if. I'll just be good to you. And don't ever try to fight God on that covenant.
Does it seem like God changed his mind? I know he didn't, but...
Yeah, somebody asked me this in a adult instruction class the other day, and I thought, it's a good question because the Bible uses anthropomorphisms to describe God's temperament, like God regretted this, or God relented of this, or it's like, wait a second, I thought God who does not change. How is God supposed to communicate to us how he's responding to our free will choices in ways that we understand that don't make him sound like there's a contradiction? I think he's trying to communicate something to us, but we then take that same thing and...
So even like when he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and he prayed and Abraham prayed...
Whittles him down.
Abraham.
Yeah.
Yes. Whittles him down. Yes.
It seems like he's changing his mind.
Yeah, but he knew the whole time what he was going to do.
So this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to understand God's operations is God exists outside of time and space. So he knows, he can experience and understand everything at the same time.
Do you think he can see like, okay, here's Abraham, and if Abraham makes this decision, this will be the end result, and this will be the end result, and... Like you can see all the different options.
Not just the conditionals, but in God's mind, our experience of time is linear. So we always think it has to fall like dominoes.
Yeah.
For God, it does not. Dominoes only exist in this lifetime. So God has seen it all. He knows exactly what the choice is. He knows exactly what Abraham's finally going to ask him for.
So when it says you've been in heaven 10,000 years.
And 1,000 years are like a day,
There actually are no years, right?
Yeah, because of the experience of time. This is why we're watching the Alien franchise on Hulu now. Because science fiction is really helpful in understanding when you start talking about like how our experience of time shifts around when you get close to like a black hole, the event horizon.
You should see the movie Interstellar is so
Interstellar
good.
is really good. It's a really good movie. But I honestly think the value of science fiction for Christians is to understand things like time and space, because so many of the questions that we have about like, well, how does even things like how does an Old Testament believer get saved if Jesus hasn't died yet?
So are all these things happening at the same time? So like, is Abraham still alive?
So you're using the word time incorrectly because you're assuming time has to be defined by linear, like the passage. But
I'm saying to God it doesn't. So is he looking down and seeing Abraham and me right now at the same time?
Well, it's impossible for us to fully comprehend. It'd be like saying, I'm trying to think of a good example, but it'd be like it's incomprehensible it'd be like, so we have 5 senses?
Yeah.
It would be like saying, okay, what would it be like to have 20 senses? Would it be possible? Could we have been created to have 20 senses instead of 5? Yes. What would the experience be like to have 20 senses? I don't know. How are you supposed to imagine that? Like, it's not impossible to think it could happen. It's just impossible to think what it would be.
We were watching this show. It's called Love on the Spectrum. Where autistic people go on dates with try to find love, basically, are set up on blind dates. And one of them it was a Rain Man thing. He was so good they'd ask him like, what day was September 29th, 1985, and he'd be like, that was a Tuesday. And I said, isn't it so fascinating to see like all the things your brain actually can do?
It's capable of, yes.
When one area, maybe like the social area, is shut down, the other areas kind of flare up.
Yeah.
Like he was just like a computer. Like that is how everyone's like, imagine if your brain worked to its full extent.
So yes, imagine that you had no limitations on that. This is the whole, was that Bradley Cooper movie, Limitless?
Yeah.
Like if you could actually use 100% of your brain. Okay, I think you could maybe at that point, maybe that's the experience of heaven. We actually get to understand things like time the way God does and that sort of thing. But like in our present system, we just can't. And so we have to submit by faith without understanding some of these things.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Devotional thought number 2, unable to outrun God's will. So I can be quick on this because we alluded to this pretty thoroughly in the last chapter, the year of Jubilee thing. We said, every 7 years there's a Sabbath year. Every set of 7 years, there's a year of Jubilee. So every 49 years. Here's what it overtly says in verses 33 to 35 of this chapter, Leviticus 26. It says, God says, I will scatter you among the nations and will draw out my sword and pursue you. Your land will be laid waste and your cities will lie in ruins. Then the land will enjoy its Sabbath years all the time that it lies desolate and you are in the country of your enemies. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbath. All the time that it lies desolate, the land will have the rest it did not have during the Sabbaths that you lived in it. So very overtly, God is saying, this is before they even do it, God is saying, you're not going to do this to the degree that I'm asking you to do it. And even though
That's how I feel about everything I ask anyone to do.
Even though God calls their bluff on it, you'd think they'd be like, no, we're gonna do it. Yeah, I know you've warned us. We're gonna do this. They don't do it. Mm-hmm. They don't. It's 70 years in Babylon, directly proportionate to the Sabbath years that were lost in their unfaithfulness when the land was supposed to rest. And again, the idea is at some point God will collect on what he says is his desire. You cannot outrun that. It reminds me a little bit of scripture writers talk about at the end of time, like in Revelation, every knee will bow down to Jesus. You cannot avoid that. Mm-hmm. The only option is, do you do it voluntarily, like you worship Jesus and submit to him, or does he have to force you down? And at the end of the time, people who don't do it voluntarily will be forced down to do it, and we're not going to like that, So I think my question here is, since we don't have a Sabbath day under the new covenant, we don't have the same kind of regulations like ceremonial regulations. What does the principle of intentional Sabbath mean for New Testament Christians?
I don't know. So some of our friends were like, we're going to do, every week we practice a Sabbath. And I was like, well, what are you doing that day? And they were like, watch sports and
we have several friends that are
read. And I was like, wait.
There's a resurgence, number one, in Christian literature on Sabbath practice. But number two, I would say we have probably half a dozen friends that talk about practicing.
And does it just mean they don't work that day?
Yeah.
Some of those people don't work anyway.
So I think I mentioned this before. A couple different people gave me the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer for Christmas this year. It's really good. John Mark Comer's stuff in general is good. But a big chunk of it is he talks about the practice of Sabbath. And what he means by that is a willful letting go of the things that you think you have to do to keep the plate spinning in life. Mm-hmm. So it's work, but it's also time spent in the Word. It's time spent in prayer. It's time spent, that seems like inefficiency. It's time spent with family without
checking your watch.
Yes, no checking watches, no checking email, no checking texts, no, very little like digital devices, period.
I've been trying really hard not to have my phone, like if we're eating or watching TV, like not even to have my phone.
Yeah.
And I think I've been doing better at it. But I don't know, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Yeah, right.
Nothing.
We like the neuroscience of it, and I'm sure this is 50 years from now we'll understand the reward center of the brain and everything better, but there's something about the pinging of sounds like Pavlovian that we react to. Oh, I got a text message, or I have to check my email, or I have to check my social media, and it's like you don't have to anything. Your reward center has told you there's something novel that you have to respond to.
All I have is Instagram, but I also have like email and text messages, and I have all of those notifications off.
Yeah.
Like I have to go into my email to check if I have new emails, even my work email. And I recently learned my pager is on my phone, so if there's like an anesthesia emergency or whatever, that will go through. And someone recently just showed me how to just change it to unavailable, and then it doesn't go off. And they're like, you 100% need to know how to do this because it's imperative when you're not at work to
maintain your sanity. Yeah. Sometimes I text you and it says Adrian Hine has silenced any messaging at this point, and I can't even get through. So, yeah, it's a necessary thing. I think Christians have to willfully, not out of laziness, but out of consciously saying, I cannot be run by the demands of the life. I should be run by the demands of a holy God who sacrificed for me. And I think that's an expression of faith. Faith isn't just doing stuff. Sometimes it's willfully not doing stuff. And the Sabbath is a good demonstration.
I might read that book. You guys know I don't really read nonfiction very much. The other day, someone asked me, it was like, Aid, what are you reading now? And so the only reason I faltered on it like an idiot is because I've been reading romantic like novels. No, they're not sexual. They're just romance.
Steamy, nonetheless.
No, they're not steamy. They're just stories about people's love stories. Colleen Hoover writes a lot of these. She's the one I've been reading. But
is there anything more than hand-holding going on in these books?
I mean, things are implied, I guess.
All right.
It's more about this relationship. Okay, anyway, but I was embarrassed that that's what I was reading. So I might try reading this Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Yeah, it's really John Mark Comer. I was over at someone's house recently and I was in their bathroom and that really grossed me out. So, I don't know. Now I have it in my head that the book's gross. There's a weird association.
Well,
it's unsanitary for me to read this book.
Some people do a significant amount of reading in the restroom.
Well,
nothing wrong with that. But yeah, John Mark Comer has two really good books that are both, I think, in like top 5 best-selling Christian books right now. The other one is Live No Lies, and
I did just get a book, and it's called Make Their Day, and it's like 101 things you can do to serve other people. And I haven't started reading it yet, but I did flip through it, and one of them said something like, learn how to cook. Like, bring people meals.
I am excited to see.
I also saw Jenny Allen just said something on social media to a group. She's a female, not motivational, Christian speaker.
Yeah, Christian author speaker.
Yeah, and I saw a clip of her and she was like, you guys don't even know, this generation does not even know what a casserole is, but it is like how you show people love. So anything with like sour cream of chicken soup, you put it all together and that means you love someone.
Yeah. All right. Leviticus 27. We're going to finish this thing off. If you need to pause to read here yourself, go ahead. Here's my summary. God told Moses that the Israelites could dedicate certain individuals to the Lord for the price of 50 shekels of silver for a male, 30 shekels for a female. I know this is going to raise some...
My brother was dedicated to the Lord.
Yeah, well, for how many shekels?
Yeah, I don't know if it cost anything. But...
Okay, well... we'll talk about the discrepancies here. 20 and 10 for a male or female young adult, 5 and 3 for a young child. For people over 60 years of age, it dropped to 15 shekels for a male and 10 for a female. Animals and houses and land also may be dedicated to the Lord, the price of which is established by the priest. They may be redeemed, which means bought back, for the price that they were sold plus another 20%. The firstborn of any animal already belongs to the Lord, though. Anything devoted to the Lord cannot be sold. The Israelites are commanded to give a tithe, 10th of all they have to the Lord. And a tithe can also be redeemed, but 20% would be added to it. That's how the book of Leviticus ends. We'll explain why here in just a second, but here's our third devotional thought. I'm going to call it a price tag on humans.
So let me just preface this with this. When I was in school, I was paying tuition and I had dropped my nursing job down to optional part-time, which means I no longer get benefits, I no longer collect, nothing goes into my retirement. I just work when I want and they'll pay me hourly for that work. And I said to you, would you like me to, because I lost these benefits when I went to optional part-time, I said, would you like me to get life insurance? And you said, why? You're only costing me money at this point. Like if you died, I would be further ahead financially because, federal student loans die with you. I wouldn't be paying tuition and I wouldn't be paying for you. And that sounds like heartless. But practically speaking, I'm not generating any income.
Right.
So if I'm less valuable, why would I pay for it?
Yeah. So yes, I think rather than knee-jerk getting offended by well, there's a different price on a male than a female, or an old person than a young person, or that kind of thing.
It just kind of makes sense, though.
It absolutely does. So the difference, it's not saying that...
It's not saying they're less valuable as a person except financially.
Not less valuable in God's sight. He's saying it's completely tied to how much work they're capable of doing, and especially in a what do you call it? A physical, labor-intensive society where it's not a knowledge.
Agrarian?
Yeah, I mean agrarian, but like they're working the fields.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, most males are going to be able to do more physical labor, accomplish more in a given day than most females, elderly, or children. This is just part of an economic system. It's for the same reason that you'd pay an adult to do something probably more than you'd pay a 12-year-old to do something because they're capable of producing more work. That's the only way to establish a fair economic system in those. So it's the same thing as going on here. It's not about like who is more valuable as a person in general. It's talking about physical labor. One scholar then estimates that a male between the ages of 20 and 60, so like a male in prime work years, costs about 4 years worth of labor. Just to give you an idea of how much, when it talks about how many shekels of silver and what exactly that amounts to.
What does it really mean, though, to dedicate them to the Lord?
Yeah, so maybe the best example of this is when we see, for instance, Samuel dedicated to the Lord.
Okay.
So remember Hannah?
You can just like give them to work at the church.
Yes.
But you have to pay for that?
No.
You were paid for that?
Yes.
Oh, so you could sell your kid to the church. You could sell someone to the church.
Yes.
So someone probably sold Anna to be in the church.
The prophets in the New Testament, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. It's also possible that probably more common than just a church is you're doing it to work off a debt. Oh. So like you are indebted to someone for whatever. And so it's like, I don't have like a bank account and I don't have credit. So what am I going to do? I'm going to work this off. And so how much is appropriate? Well, are you male or female? Are you young or old?
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to work for me for 3 years and that will amount to, that's the whole dedication concept. If you had a family member, they could come along and purchase you out of that servitude. So let's say you had a 3-year contract that you had to work off, but you have a family member who's got enough money that they can come, they have to pay for whatever you were paid for plus 20%. And they can buy you out and release you from that kind of captivity.
Yeah.
Sometimes this was done in terms of dedication to the Lord. Samuel is a good example of that from childhood on. We know there's 3 things that are supposed to be dedicated but are non-redeemable. One is the firstborn child. That belongs to the Lord. You can't in any way, shape, or form buy that back. This is one of the reasons why even the idea like when Abraham is asked to bring Isaac, Abraham knows the firstborn belongs to the Lord. You know, God has already told him that. Like, so I have no right to push back against this. I cannot like it, but like God has already told me firstborn belongs to the Lord. So he doesn't push back very hard.
Oh my gosh, this is the first time I've ever thought of this. But so you went to a boarding school for high school.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've asked certain friends of ours. We were just having a conversation with someone you went to school with. He has 3 little kids. And I said, would you send your kids to the boarding school? And he said, I would, but my wife says no, or doesn't want to. And I have always thought, like, how could you do that? How could you send your kid away at age 14 to just someone else is going to raise it and whatever? Because it's there most of the time. But maybe people view it as like, well, my children are the Lord's anyway.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you hear stories like dedicating Samuel, and he's not the only one. He wasn't the only one in Israelite history that was like that. You know, the idea that they would be dedicated at a young age for service was like, it's not completely unlike, I remember always hearing like in Soviet country or the communist countries or like the Soviet Union, Olympic athletes were picked out at like 6 years old.
Yeah.
And like some cultures, just from early on, just to kind of choose a child's path. It's just an American Western
I feel like
society
that's
that
done
says.
right now with like gymnastics or cheerleading or
Well, but I mean, this is
by the parents.
one of
not
the
by
reasons why
country.
I see so many 18, 20-year-olds that are like, I can't believe I have to make a decision for the rest of my life about what I'm supposed to be doing, and they change their majors 8 times. It's because there was a time in history where, generally speaking, parents sort of picked out where your life was going to go, who you were going to marry, like that kind of thing. Like the idea that we leave major life decisions up to 18-year-olds is a little bit counterintuitive. But yeah, you could be devoted to the Lord at a young age. You could be, any number of things like that. But they weren't allowed to redeem the firstborn. They weren't allowed to redeem the first fruit tithes. Those belonged to the Lord. So the firstborn, the first fruit tithes, and also the things that were called the devoted things. Where actually this comes up in the New Testament is this thing called korban. It's a non-translated word that talks about the Pharisees refuse to help out family members financially because they say Jesus essentially calls them out on this. They're hiding behind an Old Testament law for not showing compassion. But point being, it's things that were devoted, money that was devoted to the Lord. The general purpose of this chapter, and you think, okay, why does this book end this way? Well, remember, it's part of a series of books, the Pentateuch. So it's not necessarily like an end to a narrative in any way. But the basic concept in this chapter is God has been completely serious in his commitment to us. And in response, we should also be serious in our commitment to him. The things we devote to him, giving him the first of all things, that sort of thing. Any final thoughts on the book of Leviticus?
I think that's all my thoughts and songs.
It's a lot. It feels like we've been going through Leviticus for a while, and we have.
What's next?
And so we sprinted through the last 5 chapters. I don't know. We'll have to kind of wait and see. But we probably are, just so you know, going to take a week off for recording for a couple of different reasons. But we will be back up and running with a new book in 2 weeks' time. So not next Monday, but 2 Mondays from now, we'll be releasing the next episode. And whatever book it is, I'm looking forward to it. And that next book is probably going to take us through episode 300. So looking forward to it. Thanks for studying with us as always.
No prayers today.
No, we should pray.
You almost forgot.
I almost did. Heavenly Father, again, thank you for bringing us through this book of Leviticus. It's probably the least studied, most misunderstood, sometimes most negatively reacted to book of the Bible. What I can say is I have an additional appreciation for the concept of sacrifices. Not only the sacrifice you've made for us, but how we think through the sacrifices we make to honor and glorify and commit to you. The concept of your perfect holiness. Any number of different ways in which we remember you and remember the promises of what you're going to continue to do for us. Please help us take these things to heart and help us to appreciate the ultimate sacrifice. Even though we don't live under this Old Testament system, it was completed by the ultimate sacrifice in your Son. So we thank you for him and ask that you continue to bless this study for us and our people at home moving forward. In your name we pray. Amen. Thanks for studying with us. We will see you next time for who knows what, but it'll be episode 288.